Hi, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, That's Life, I Swear. I'm your host, Rick Barron. Today, Americans aren't angry at Congress anymore. Anger requires a level of surprise. What they feel now is something colder, the settled, bone-deep resignation of people who have watched their government break its own records for failure so many times that the records have stopped meaning anything. Welcome to That's Life, I Swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. So here it is, America to Congress. Enough already. Americans are exhausted. And it's not the mild, grumbling fatigue of voters who gripe about politicians between elections and then go on about their lives. No, there's something deeper here. It's an ongoing, grinding weariness with a Congress that has broken nearly every record worth breaking and sets new ones that nobody wanted. Now, the numbers tell a grim story. A recent Gallup poll found that just 10% of Americans approve of how Congress is doing. That means 9 out of every 10 people in this country, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, the politically obsessed and the perpetually disengaged alike, look at the institution that is supposed to represent them and see something they don't like. A minus 76 percentage points net approval. I mean, Congress isn't merely unpopular. It has become a symbol of everything voters believe is broken about Washington. And yet nothing changes. I mean, decade after decade, shutdown after shutdown, the chaos compounds. The latest chapter began promisingly enough, at least by the dismally low standards Washington now sets for itself. The House passed a measure to reopen most of the Department of Homeland Security after it had been closed for 76 days. Seriously, 76 days. In a functioning democracy, that alone would be a scandal worth of outrage, resignations, and wholesale reconsideration of how the people's business gets done. Instead, lawmakers congratulated themselves on threading a needle that shouldn't have been required threading in the first place. Now, the celebration was short-lived. Imagine that. The bill didn't solve anything fundamental. It didn't repair the fractures in the Republican caucus. It didn't erase the hostility between the House and the Senate. And more importantly, it didn't give ordinary Americans any reason to believe their government is capable of sustained, responsible governance. You lose majorities by overreach and dysfunction, said Representative Tom Cole, the Oklahoma Republican who chairs the House Appropriations Committee. And he said, and right now, we don't look as functional as we need to look. Gee, imagine that. That is perhaps the most understated assessment of Washington's current condition since someone described the Titanic as having encountered some difficulty. The dysfunction isn't theoretical. It has teeth. Last year, Congress presided over the longest full government shutdown in American history. 43 days during which federal workers went without paychecks. National parks went unstaffed, and government services that millions of Americans depend on were suspended. 43 days. The previous record was 35 days, and that one was considered a catastrophe. This one was treated as a negotiating tactic. My God, of all things. The Department of Homeland Security partial shutdown just ended, which ran 76 days, making it the longest partial shutdown on record. At some point, the records become less impressive than they are indicating. The United States government, the most powerful governing institution in the history of human civilization, cannot keep its own lights on. Legislation is faring far much better. Through late April of 2026, the current Congress has enacted roughly 90 laws, somewhat of an anemic output that trails almost every recent Congress session. The previous Congress, which itself was widely condemned as one of the least productive in modern memory, still managed to pass 274 laws. The one before that passed more. And the one before that, well, guess what? Trust me when I say the trend line is not ambiguous. Now, the practical effect of all this paralysis falls hardest on ordinary people. Some examples. Farmers are still waiting for the Farm Bill. Communities dependent on federal grants that get frozen in continuing resolution limbo. And veterans navigating a VA bureaucracy that operates on temporary funding patches. I think those guys deserve a whole lot better. These are not abstract policy concerns. They are real, daily consequences borne by people who have very little to say in whether their elected representatives can get out of their own way. Again, America to Congress. Enough already. When Congress abdicates, someone else steps in. In this case, it's the White House. Now, President Trump has issued more than 250 executive orders since returning to office, more than he signed during his entire first term, and more than the 4-year total of any president since Jimmy Carter. Now, on that level, that's simply a president doing what presidents do when Congress won't act. Now, on another level, it represents a structural shift in how this country is actually governed, a shift with implications that should alarm anyone who believes in the constitutional design of separated powers. Let me give you a few. The Constitution gives Congress the authority to levy taxes and declare war. Yet the Trump administration has sidestepped Congress on tariffs, reshaping the global trading system through executive action. Another example is that Trump has taken military actions without congressional approval that the War Power Act requires. Most recently, when a 60-day deadline to seek congressional authorization for military activity in Iran loomed, the White House announced it would just simply reset the clock, treating a legal requirement as a technicality to be managed rather than a check to be respected. Seriously, Congress, for its part, has largely acquiesced. Its members complain loudly in interviews and on social media. But the institutional response, the kind of assertive, bipartisan pushback that would actually constrain executive overreach, has been slow to materialize. The silence of a co-equal branch speaks volumes, and what it says is not reassuring. It's the sound of crickets on steroids. Now back home, people are paying attention. Maybe not to the procedural technicalities of which faction blocked which bill, or which chamber is currently blaming the other for the latest impasse, but they feel it. Here's a few. Small business owners who can't get answers from federal agencies operating on emergency funding. Parents of service members deployed without formal congressional authorization. Local governments are waiting on federal infrastructure dollars that got swept up in yet another continuing resolution. Now, none of these people voted for gridlock, and none of them elected their representatives hoping for a government that breaks its own shutdown records and can't pass a farm bill without a month-long fight. What makes the public's frustration particularly acute is the sense that the people responsible for the chaos don't experience its consequences. Members of Congress still get paid during shutdowns. Their health care doesn't get disrupted. They don't wait online at a social services office. The distance between the governed and the governing has never felt much wider. Former Representative Fred Upton, a Republican from Michigan, who served as a committee chairman before retiring in 2023, put it with uncomfortable bluntness. He said, it's just a mess. I mean, both sides, we just shake our heads at how things have gone off the deep end. You talk to any former member, and they I'm so glad we're gone. Now pause in that moment, will you? The people who used to hold the institution's most powerful positions are relieved to have escaped it. That should tell you a lot there. That's not a healthy sign for any organization, let alone the legislative branch of the world's oldest constitutional democracy. Again, America to Congress. Enough already. Inside the Capitol, the finger-pointing has reached a kind of operatic intensity. House Republicans are furious at Senate Republicans for passing bills without consulting them, and then demanding action on a timetable driven by Senate priorities. Senate Republicans are exasperated by the House's inability to hold together even a narrow majority. Senate Democrats look across the aisle and see chaos, while their Republican colleagues remind anyone who will listen that it was Senate Democrats who triggered last year's record-long shutdown to fight cuts to healthcare spending, a fight they eventually abandoned with little to show for it. "We just do what we can," Senate Majority Leader John Thune said when asked how the Senate manages when the House is in disarray. It was not a rousing declaration of institutional purpose. Representative Byron Donalds of Florida, a member of the Freedom Caucus, aimed his frustrations squarely at the Senate. He went on to say the Senate doesn't do anything, and then they basically jam us with some BS that nobody wants to do, and then they do it at the 11th hour. He also pushes back on using the number of laws passed as a yardstick for congressional performance, arguing that quality matters more than quantity. That's a defensible position in theory. In practice, however, a Congress that can't fund the government on time, that lurches from shutdown to shutdown, that requires 9-hour votes left open while leadership scrambles to find a majority, that Congress is failing on both quality and quantity at the same time. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, a Democrat who spent years in the House, didn't spare his own chamber while describing the House's troubles. He said, "Look at the Senate. There is no thing of beauty there. Now, don't get me wrong," he said, "but what you're seeing in the House, in addition to essentially being a rubber stamp to Donald Trump, is complete chaos." Again, America to Congress, enough already. Perhaps the most telling sign of Congress's condition is who is choosing to leave it. More than 1 in 8 House members have announced they won't seek re-election, the highest voluntary departure rate since the early 1990s. 3 members didn't even wait for the next election, resigning last month rather than face potential expulsion proceedings. 11 senators have announced plans to leave after their current terms. Now, these are not marginal members, backbenchers who couldn't get a bill through committee and decided to cut their losses. Some are experienced legislators with committee assignments, institutional relationships, and the kind of seniority that takes decades to build. They are leaving anyway. That choice to walk away from power rather than fight for it tells its own story about what has become of Congress. 30 years ago, Congress last managed to pass all 12 annual government funding bills on time before the end of the fiscal year. 30 years. 3 decades of drift, delay, continuing resolutions, comprehensive packages, and brinkmanship have normalized a governing model built on perpetual crisis management rather than genuine legislation. "We've normalized shutting down the government," said former Representative Charlie Dent, a Pennsylvania Republican. "Both sides have done it now." He's got a point, and that normalization is perhaps the most dangerous thing of all, because a country that stops being shocked by its government's failure has in some way started accepting it. Representative Cole offered a warning to his own colleagues that sounds less like optimism than a last appeal to self-preservation. He said, "You can either be a part of a functional majority and get almost everything you want, or you can hold out and get nothing and be in the minority the next time." He went on to say, "I guess we can all get to vote no together then. That would be exciting." The American people are watching from the outside and are not excited, and they are tired, and they are fed up. Again, America to Congress, enough already. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? Congress is historically dysfunctional right now by nearly every measurable standard, from shutdown length to laws passed to members' departures. Now, there are several layers of takeaway here. Let me give you a few. Dysfunction has been normalized. The most dangerous line in this story may be the piece by Charlie Dent. "We've normalized shutting down the government." When crisis becomes routine, institutions lose the shame mechanism that once corrected bad behavior. Nobody resigns over a shutdown anymore. Nobody faces real consequences. The checks and balances are quietly eroding. Congress's inability to govern isn't just an inconvenience, it creates a vacuum. And vacuums get filled. Now, in this case, by executive orders, by tariff actions taken without congressional approval, by military operations that sidestep the War Powers Act. The story isn't really about a dysfunctional Congress in isolation, It's about what happens to the constitutional order when one branch stops doing its job. Slim majorities have become ungovernable. Now, the math matters. A 218 to 212 House majority means any small faction holds veto power. That structural reality rewards obstruction and punishes compromise, almost regardless of who's in charge. And finally, the people suffering are outside this building. Members still get paid during shutdowns. They don't wait at social services offices. The human cost lands on farmers, veterans, federal workers, and local governments, the very people Congress is supposed to serve. Now, let me give you a quick note here, though. There is a little bit of light. At the time of this recording, the U.S. Senate had passed a resolution that they would not get paid during a shutdown. Finally, some good news. Now, the ultimate takeaway may be this. A democracy doesn't collapse all at once. It degrades gradually through accumulated small failures that each get normalized until the baseline of acceptable governance quietly shifts downward, and fewer people even notice it happening. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts, for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you soon.